So I went through this once with a group, and a kind of quite business-minded individual said, so what you're basically talking about is a business planning process with a gap analysis. And I said, well, yeah, except you're learning about equalities along the way, so you can build that knowledge into that business planning process and gap analysis. Most of these processes are familiar to us, it's just that we haven't always had an equalities head-on when we're going through them. I like to kind of chunk it down as well to give you a better idea of the work involved. I see there being three main streams of work that we can do. One is about gathering evidence. So we're going for consultation and involvement. We're monitoring where we can in terms of who's using our services and who works for us. And we're using this information to benchmark our equalities performance. Now, if we have some equalities monitoring information that shows us what proportion of different groups of people use our service, we can go to sources like the Local Health Board data or the census data for Scotland. We've only just done one, so it'll all be nice and current. We can go in there and look and see how our organisation compares to the local population. And that helps us to see if we're missing anybody out. In terms of strategy, that would be my next kind of strand I'd think about. We can use the evidence we've got to help us in our strategic planning and our action planning. So everything from your individual work plans right up to plans for particular projects, etc. We can use this to inform it. Obviously as well that feeds into policy review, and if you want to go down the route of impact assessment, equality impact assessment, which is an interesting service improvement tool, you can also use your evidence there. Obviously as well we want to have a good equality policy. Increasingly we actually need one just to access basic funding and things like that. Have to demonstrate that we have that. There may be other policies you'd like to have in place like dignity at work, etc. too. And in terms of practice, obviously we want to be thinking about equality in employment. Now not all of us are lucky enough to have an HR officer or something like that. So it's down to the senior staff who are responsible for recruitment to make sure that they understand how the law works there, and in terms of support and supervision and all the other things we do for our staff. Training and development, I've already mentioned that you can access development opportunities pretty much free of charge and with minimal time commitment, so it's definitely recommended. And of course at the end of the day the big goal is accessible service provision and communications. Scottish Accessible Information Forum's a very good source of information about how to make your communications accessible, and I've put that in your further reading sheet I'm going to give you in a minute. So lastly, to look at the tools that we can use for mainstreaming. Some of the things that we've covered in the big programme, which of course are open to you to find out about, and many of them you probably already do, particularly consultation and involvement. I'm thinking most of you have some knowledge of that. But we've got equality law, we've got our equality statement or policy, an equalities action plan, or if you're just going to build equalities related stuff into your other action plans, that's also fine. We can use equality impact assessment, consultation, engagement, involvement, and most importantly we want to involve our own processes. So whatever you do as standard is going to be your best tool for implementing equality if you just mainstream it in there. Your planning processes, your policy review, your staff development, you could go on for any length of time. But I think I've gone on long enough. So I'll take some questions if any of you have any after that rant.
I'll have one. I wonder if you can put one of the slides back up for me if that.
Yeah, sure.
I've got copies of
Oh, that was wonderful.
if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I sent them through in case anyone wanted to electronically. Would that do you?
I said about personal and sort of institutional, and then just
Yeah.
put a bit to our organisation. I think it's a pretty good way of doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the thing. It can be a lot of the time when you do training or you read a guide, they talk about these concepts without actually explaining to you how they work, you know, and sometimes it can get a bit sort of, meaningless, if you like, to your own work and things like that. Which is definitely something that we've come up against when we're providing training to people. I actually had one person come to training a few months ago, and she was from a membership organisation much like GCBS, and I'm going through the different steps you can take to make things accessible. The day was about accessibility. We did access audits and we did a few other things, and she said, she came up at the end, she said, I'm really still having trouble getting to grips with how any of this applies to my organisation, because the people who come in to see me aren't service users, they're just representatives from other voluntary organisations. I said to her, but are they people? She said, yeah. You go then. That's all you need to know, it's about people. So yes, it can be difficult to get the meaning in there sometimes. Any other questions?
Okay, there's lots of quiet. Carol, you can go back.
They've all been talked into silence.
It's the application of it at the moment, the scope of the application of it for itself, within the organisation, something that's set along. We've had a couple of meetings, but really for each level, to mainstream the qualities into the organisation, that affects and becomes working practice and living practice, I suppose, for everyone. What's the scope of that at the moment? At the moment, you're probably currently just trying to look at what strategy should be developed, and probably the better we put the initial pitch in, make an impact and make a difference and make change, because obviously it's so difficult, it's so engaging in that scope. So that's why sort of come back to where do we start? Start with lots of knowledge on the bold of the we start with an even within constituted groups within the organisation.
What quality standard framework do you use?
At the moment, it's the framework that has just quality policy.
Like, so you don't have like a framework,
you don't have a framework.
So like the CASO or the EFQ and Eplet ones, I was going to say they actually kind of welcome that, they just fit in there so nicely as part of the course.
I think that's the challenge we will have.
Come speak to me.
Oh, there's no challenge. Well, I can get for you.
Sorry, can I just ask if we've done this for a while, we're trying to have our policies as flexible as possible for the people we're working with and the staff. Is there any guidance for what happens if one group conflicts with another group? Because it seems to me everybody has the individual right to have but what if one? So we've ended up with a large number of people who are asking for flexible working because of young children. But equally, we're getting a lot of the people we support are asking, because of personalisation, they're now asking for specific times for their support. And everybody has their own request, but there's quite a lot of conflict on how to resolve that.
Yeah, and basically the general rule with all equality stuff like that is that it's a balance of harm thing. What you would have to do is almost a kind of SWOT analysis of the options that are open to you. What are the strengths of using this option and the weaknesses? What are the weaknesses of this option and the strengths? And comparing the options that are open to you, and also talking to the people involved to see if maybe there are other options you haven't thought of as well. It's really important to kind of involve people in a discussion there. Also, by involving them in discussions about it, it means that if you eventually come to a decision that's not what they wanted to hear, they'll feel that they've been listened to, and they'll probably better understand your reasons for having to say no to certain requests. So yeah, it's never easy.
Go through the process, and if you have two conflict or a conflict like that, by going through the process, then a threshold of some sort of balance will be set by yourself just by going through the process.
Yeah, you'll usually find that there's one way of working will have a more significant negative impact than another, or if neither of them have a particularly negative impact, one will have a much more positive impact than the other, if you like.
Is that what kind of the reasonable adjustment part comes in. It's to kind of give it a safety net, if you like, to the organisation. You don't have to bend over backwards and bend to the demands of every single request that comes your way under the Equalities Act. It just wouldn't be feasible. All the organisations would be doing a dream would have made you work 95 Monday to Friday for a start. So I think that you need to look into that as well. What realistically can the organisation reasonably do to accommodate it, and you're then going to take it from there. But I think if you're going through the process and you've got all the evidence there that they're talking about, you say, well, this is what we've done. If we do this, it's not an option. This is what's going to happen. Realistically, it's going to have to be European. And I think that's where you can't get out of more than that.
In terms of your duty to make reasonable adjustments for disabled people, if you had a situation, say, where one person wanted to use flexible working to spend more time with their family, and one person wanted to use flexible working because a health problem made it difficult for them to do 9 to 5, and that health problem counted as a disability, you would be expected to go with the person who had a disability, because although it would be indirect discrimination against women to say nobody's getting the flexible working, that's a slightly foggier and more flexible area of the law than reasonable adjustments for disabled people, whereby unless you've got an unbelievably great excuse for not doing what you're asked, trouble can arise. And it's the one area for disabled people, they're the one group of people under the Equality Act who have a legal right to be treated more favourably than other groups, simply because of the absolutely gigantic amount of barriers that are out there preventing them from getting ahead. So yeah, it's not 100% straightforward, but most of the time that balance of harm outlook will guide you to the right place eventually. Any other questions?
The dignity in the workplace law.
I knew you were going to ask, that's why you asked, Laura.
I mean, is that one you can lift off the shelf, or is it again something very much to be shaped by your organisations?
The best ones, in terms of the dignity at work policies, the best ones are ones that are shaped by the organisation, because it makes it feel more relevant to the people you work with. But you can definitely get templates. There's various, getting shouted at by Norton. There's various different templates available if you have a look on the internet or whatever. Quite a good idea, I usually find, rather than going with the first template you find, is to actually download a couple from different places. You know, maybe a local authority one from a college and one from a health board or something, because they're usually not more than sort of 3 pages long or something like that. Although some of them, health board ones in particular, can go up to a lot more than that. But if you read through them, then you can pick and choose the bits you like the best and use that to kind of, it's almost a template for you. You're not having to start from scratch, but it means you've got a wee bit more flexibility there. And they're very useful things. I can't recommend them highly enough.